Her breath was warm against his chest, a fragile rhythm beneath layers of scorched cloth and dust. Elias could feel it through the seam of his suit. Each inhale a reminder that she was still alive, and each exhale a warning that the air here was running out. The corridor around them was a broken artery of the ship, its walls scorched black, its deck splintered by impacts and its lights barely flickering through the drifting haze of coolant mist. The scent was sharp and metallic, biting at the back of his throat, and every step forward stirred faint motes of ash that caught the dim glow like falling embers. Somewhere far below, deep in the belly of the vessel, the reactor still throbbed with a sluggish heartbeat, just enough to keep the dead Hulk from freezing solid. He had been the only human left aboard since the second breach. The rest of the crews, those who weren't torn apart in the first minutes of the boarding, had been either jettisoned into the void or sealed behind bulkheads that no longer opened. The war was supposed to be over years ago, but the predators who stalked the silent lanes of space didn't care for treaties. When he found the child, she was hidden in the wreckage of a collapsed storage bay, her thin body curled between shattered crates, her skin shimmering faintly as if dusted with frost. That shimmer had been the first clue. He'd seen it before once, on a dying world whose name humanity no longer spoke, where his unit had been sent to evacuate civilians before the enemy's final purge. They had saved a few thousand back. Then, not enough. Never enough. Now, she was all that was left here. The last survivor of a people who could not survive the cold alone, who carried their history not in machines or archives, but in the strange luminous patterns that moved beneath their skin like living constellations. She had not spoken a word. Since he'd lifted her from the wreckage, only watched him with those vast, unblinking eyes, as if measuring whether he was real or just another vision from the edge of death. He didn't need her to speak. He only needed her to keep breathing. The ship creaked under a shift in pressure, a long metallic groan that echoed through the dark. He froze, listening. It wasn't just the hull settling. Somewhere forward of their position, something was moving, something that didn't belong to the ship. The sound was deliberate, measured, like claws testing the strength of the metal underfoot. He tightened his grip on her hand. The deck plating was cold beneath his boots, but she didn't seem to notice, her bare feet silent against the steel. The shadows seemed to lean toward them as they moved, carrying with them the faint smell of burned ozone. The way ahead narrowed into a maintenance passage, the kind of place where only one could move at a time. He swept his light forward, what little power it had left, and caught sight of jagged holes in the wall where something had torn through the plating. Whatever hunted here had been in this corridor recently. The light flickered, and for an instant, the girl's skin seemed to catch it and return it tenfold. Casting a faint halo in the darkness, the sound behind them stopped. It was worse than hearing it. The stillness pressed in like a weight, thick enough to make the breath catch in his chest. Elias didn't turn. Turning meant looking, and looking meant wasting seconds they didn't have. Instead, he shifted the child's position, bringing her in front of him so he could shield her with his body if the darkness behind decided to move. Her eyes were fixed ahead, her face unreadable, yet her grip on his sleeve tightened until he felt the tug through the fabric. She knew the silence was wrong. The maintenance passage was barely wide enough for him to move sideways, scraping his shoulder along the cold wall. Steel smelled faintly of oil and blood, a scent too fresh to belong to the battle that had already passed. Every few meters his boots crunched over something brittle, a snapped wire, a shard of polyglass, or bone. The girl stepped lightly, never stumbling, her gaze darting to places where the dark seemed to ripple just beyond his light. He didn't ask what she saw. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. A soft hiss whispered through the corridor ahead. Mechanical breathing. Elias froze, the cold leaching through his gloves as he pressed a hand against the wall. The ship's thin atmosphere carried the faintest vibration, enough to tell him there was movement not far ahead. He weighed his options quickly. Retreat meant going back toward the thing that had been following them.
Back forward meant risking whatever was waiting in the shadows ahead.
Staying here meant dying in the middle. He reached down, his gloved fingers brushing the sidearm holstered at his thigh. The weapon was heavy, solid, the last piece of functioning human engineering on this ghost ship besides the life support, and he doubted it would be enough against the things that hunted here. Still, it was something. The girl shifted slightly, and in the faint blue glow of her skin, he caught the outline of her features calm, but not afraid. It was almost as if she'd been in this exact moment before, caught between predators and survived. A shape moved in the dim ahead, blocking what little light filtered from a shattered panel. It didn't advance, didn't retreat, just waited. The breathing was louder now, heavy, deliberate, matching the slow pulse of the ship's failing systems. Elias felt the back of his neck prickle. They were being measured. Behind them, the metallic footfalls resumed slow, unhurried, as though whatever followed had decided there was no need to rush. Trapped between two dangers, he tightened his grip on her hand. She looked up at him, her gaze steady, and for the first time, he thought he saw something in her expression that wasn't just trust. It was resolve. The shape in front stepped forward, and the narrow passage was suddenly filled with a towering silhouette, its outline jagged and uneven, its eyes burning like molten metal. There was no way past without going through. The thing in front of them was too large for the passage, its shoulders scraping the walls with a sound like teeth grinding on stone. Elias caught a glimpse of armor fused with flesh, metal plates melded into sinew, wires pulsing faintly like veins. Its molten eyes didn't blink. They only burned, steady and patient, as if trying to decide whether to crush them now or savor. The fear first. The heat radiating from its gaze was almost physical, prickling his skin even through the suit. He angled himself between the girl and the creature, every muscle tight. The sidearm in his hand felt small, absurdly so, but he raised it anyway, the barrel steady, despite the hammering in his chest. The thing's breathing filled the narrow corridor, each exhale carrying the scent of scorched metal and something far fouler like meat left too long in the sun. Behind them, the second set of footsteps drew closer, lighter but quicker. Cutting off any hope of retreat, the girl's grip shifted, not pulling away never, but guiding. She turned her hand in his until her palm pressed against his wrist, her fingers curling around the weapon. Her skin was warm, almost fever-hot now, and in that warmth a faint pulse traveled up his arm. For an instant, the blue glow beneath her skin flared brighter, spilling across the cramped space in ripples of shifting light. The predator paused, its molten gaze narrowing. Elias didn't know whether it was confusion or recognition, but it hesitated on. That was all he needed. He fired. The shot roared in the enclosed corridor, the recoil jarring his shoulder. Round hit center mass, sparking against the fused armor before sinking into flesh. The creature staggered, not from pain, but from the force of the impact. And Elias lunged forward, using the moment to shove the girl past its side. Metal claws raked the wall inches from her face, sparks showering her hair, but she didn't stumble. She moved with a sudden, uncanny speed. Slipping into the darkness beyond, Elias followed, heart pounding, the predator's roar splitting the air behind him. The sound was raw, furious, but under it was something else fear. Not for him, he realized, but for her. The thought chilled him more than the icy air. The corridor opened into a wider chamber lit only by the weak, stuttering pulse of the reactor far below. Cables hung like roots from the ceiling, swaying gently in the stale air. The girl stopped at the edge of a grated walkway, her gaze fixed downward. Far beneath, in the chasm's shadows, something vast shifted too large to be contained by. The ship's bones, and then he heard it. Not footsteps this time, but a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate inside his skull. The same hum that had filled the air during the last hours of that dying world years ago, when his unit had been told there was nothing left to save. The girl looked back at him, her eyes reflecting not fear, but inevitability. The hum deepened until it wasn't just a sound, but a sensation, crawling along Elias's bones and making the air feel thick enough to drink. The grated walkway trembled beneath his boots, every vibration carrying up from the abyss below. Through The shifting shadows, he could make out only fragments of the thing that moved there, an edge of iridescent carapace glinting in the reactor's failing light. The suggestion of limbs that clung to the walls like an insect, and a slow, deliberate coil of movement that told him it wasn't trapped. It was waiting. The girl stood at the walkway's edge, hands resting lightly on the railing, her eyes locked on the abyss as though greeting an old companion. The glow under her skin intensified, the shifting constellations in her flesh moving. Faster now, their patterns flowing into something almost deliberate. Elias's gut tightened. This wasn't fear in her. This was recognition. It's the same way she had recognized the predator that hunted them. The same way she had recognized the dying hum when they entered the chamber. Behind them, a scrape of claws against metal announced the first predator's approach. Its growl was low and ragged, but there was no mistaking the intent in it. The second set of footsteps was there, too quicker, sharper, closing in. They had nowhere left to run. Elias stepped forward, putting himself between the girl and the narrow access path that led back into the corridor. His sidearms magazine was nearly spent, and he doubted the rounds left would be enough to stop even one of their hunters. The hum from below rose, merging with the predator's growls until the two sounds were nearly indistinguishable. Elias risked a glance into the chasm again, and this time he saw an eye or something like one open far below, glistening with the same silver-blue light that shimmered under the girl's skin. Blinked once, slowly, and the hum became a steady, unbroken note. The predators stopped in the doorway, molten eyes shifting uneasily toward the abyss. The girl finally moved. She turned from the railing and walked toward Elias, her expression still calm, but carrying an edge of urgency. She took his hand not in fear, but as if to anchor him, and in the instant her skin touched his, the hum in his bones changed pitch. It was no longer something oppressive. It was direction from the shadows below. Something immense began to climb. The first limb emerged from the chasm, the sound like metal bending under its own memory of weight. It was not a limb in the human sense, more like an articulated span of armor and sinew, each segment ending in delicate talon-like hooks that sank effortlessly into the steel. The walkway shuddered beneath the strain as more of it came. Into view, plates of iridescent shell that caught what little light remained and shattered it into shifting colors across the chamber's walls. Every movement was deliberate, each pull upward precise. Like a creature built for patience rather than speed, Elias's breath frosted in the cold. The taste of ozone thick in his mouth. His sidearm felt even smaller now, an absurd piece of human defiance against something that could break the walkway apart without noticing. Yet the predators in the doorway did not advance. Their molten eyes tracked the ascent with a wariness he had never seen in them before. Claws curling and flexing without striking, the girl stepped closer to the edge as the massive creature's head came into view. It was not shaped for war, not in the brutal, jagged way of the predators, but neither was it gentle. Its surface was a seamless blend of organic curvature and metallic symmetry, a design that looked both engineered and born. Where eyes might have been were two luminous arcs, silver blue and deep with shifting light mirroring the glow beneath the girl's skin. When it looked at her, it didn't blink. The hum that had been thrumming in Elias's bones now filled the entire chamber, vibrating through the walls and the air. He felt it in his teeth, in his spine, and most of all, in his chest. The girl lifted her hand, palm out, and the massive head lowered until its surface hovered inches from her touch. The glow beneath her skin flared, matching the creature's light perfectly, and for a breathless moment, the sound in the chamber shifted again, no longer a hum, but something almost like a voice just below the range of hearing. Elias didn't understand the words, but he understood the effect. The predators took a step back. The girl turned, her gaze finding his, and for the first time there was something sharp in it, unspoken command, not a plea. Behind her, the creature's limbs shifted, bracing against the walls as if ready to rise fully into the chamber. The metal groaned. Elias realized he was no longer deciding whether to fight the predators. He was deciding whether to follow the girl's lead, or be left behind when the thing below chose to act. The walkway shuddered as the creature surged upward, its weight sending deep, resonant groans through the chamber's steel bones. Segmented limbs gripped the walls with a terrifying grace, hauling its full mass into view. Up close, Elias could see the surface was neither pure metal nor flesh, but something that blurred the line. Alive with slow pulses of light that moved like breath beneath its armor, its luminous arcs, where eyes should be, shifted toward him briefly before returning to the girl, as if weighing her importance against his existence. The predators reacted first. The larger one in the doorway let out a bellow, claws slicing deep, gouges into the floor, molten eyes burning hotter, but it didn't charge. The smaller one shifted from side to side, its claws clicking against the deck. Its gaze fixed not on Elias or the girl, but on the creature's rising form, Elias realized. They weren't afraid of him, they were afraid of it. The hum in the chamber became a sharp, cutting pulse. Elias felt it in his sternum, in his jaw, in the air itself, like a pressure wave that rattled the walkway's bolts. The predators recoiled, taking several steps back into the shadows beyond the doorway. The larger one's molten glare didn't fade, but it did not follow as the smaller one melted into the corridor's dark. The sound wasn't just driving them back, it was commanding them. The girl turned her head toward Elias, her patterns of light shifting rapidly, faster than before, the rhythm almost matching the creature's pulse. She still hadn't spoken, but her meaning was clear enough. The hunt was over. But the danger wasn't gone. The massive creature lowered itself until its head was level with the walkway. A section of its armor unfolded in intricate layers, revealing an interior passage just wide enough for a person to step into. Not a mouth, there were no teeth, no organic wetness, just a hollow lined with soft, glowing surfaces that pulsed. Gently inviting, Elias's instinct screamed against stepping inside anything that could crush him without effort. But the girl moved without hesitation, her bare feet making no sound on the grated steel. She didn't look back until she was already framed by the creature's open armor, her glow blending seamlessly with its own. For the first time since finding her, Elias felt that the choice he made here wouldn't just decide whether they lived, would decide whether he learned the truth of what she was. Behind them, in the darkness of the abandoned corridor, the predators began to growl again. The air changed the instant Elias stepped through the opening, sealing him away from the predators' growls and the dying ship's metallic stench. It was warmed at the stifling heat of machinery, but a steady, living warmth that seeped into his bones. The walls curved around him in smooth arcs, seamless and faintly translucent, with rivers of pale light running just beneath the surface. Every step he took sent faint ripples through the glow, as though the place was aware of his presence and adjusting to him. The girl walked ahead, her bare feet silent on the floor. Where she stepped, the rivers of light swelled brighter, shifting into patterns that Elias almost recognized, shapes he had seen once on banners carried by the refugees they had saved years ago, before their cities burned. She didn't glance back to check if he was following. She simply assumed he would. And somehow he knew he would. There was no hum here, no oppressive throb like in the reactor chamber. Instead, the space felt purposeful. Each wall seemed to breathe faintly, expanding and contracting at a rhythm that matched the girl's own. Occasionally, the walls would part just enough to reveal glimpses beyond glimpses of open space, of shattered wreckage drifting silently, of stars spread like frost over black glass. He realized then that they were moving. The creature wasn't just in the ship, it was leaving. Elias kept his sidearm close out of habit, though it felt increasingly absurd. Nothing in here was built to harm him, at least, not in the crude physical sense. There were no sharp edges, no weapons visible, just endless living corridors that curved and intersected like veins. Yet the feeling of being inside something older than his species, something that had survived where countless civilizations had not, sent a cold thread of caution through him. They entered a wider chamber where the floor sloped gently downward, into a basin lined with glimmering strands that swayed like grass in a wind he couldn't feel. The girl stepped into the basin, and the strands rose, curling around her wrists and ankles like welcoming hands. Her glow deepened, the shifting constellations beneath her skin settling into a steady formation. The walls around them brightened in response. Elias stood at the edge, unsure if this was a sanctuary or a trap. His voice felt too loud in the stillness. When he finally spoke her first words aloud. But before he could ask, the chamber's far wall unfurled into a vast, transparent pane. Beyond it, through the void, he saw something that made his breath stop. The Predator's ship, larger than the wreck they'd escaped, was turning to follow, and the living machine was turning to face it. The living walls around Elias shifted. The rivers of light flaring in sharp pulses that traveled toward the transparent pane as though the entire interior were focusing on what lay beyond. The Predator ship was closing in, its dark hull bristling with spines and ridges like a deep-sea creature built to crush whatever wandered too close. Its engines burned with a low red glare, a predator's eyes in the void, and even through the silent vacuum, Elias felt its intent relentless and patient. The way a hunting beast circles before striking, the girl didn't move from the basin. She stood rooted among the curling strands. Her glow, now in perfect rhythm, with the surges of light running through the walls. Elias could see it clearly now. She wasn't simply a passenger here. She was part of this thing, part of its memory, part of the way it breathed and thought. The patterns under her skin were no longer shifting at random. They mirrored the arcs of light racing along the chamber's surface. She and the machine were speaking in a language too old for him to understand. The Predator ship opened its forward section, revealing an array of weapons gleaming, needle-like projectiles designed to pierce holes in silence and tear apart everything inside without a sound. They fired in a sudden burst, streaks of blacker than black that seemed to swallow. Light as they moved, Elias tensed, bracing instinctively for impact. The living machine responded without moving in any way he recognized. The chamber's light flared white for the space of a heartbeat, and the transparent pane shifted, darkening until the stars beyond were filtered through a shimmering veil. The projectile struck, a tan dissolved. No explosion, no deflection. They simply unraveled into dust that drifted harmlessly into the void. Elias stared, caught between awe and disbelief, as the living machine's light dimmed again to silver blue. Outside, the Predator ship hesitated. It circled wider now, its movements more cautious. But predators rarely gave up without testing their prey again. A deeper vibration rolled through the chamber, one that Elias could feel in the pit of his stomach. The transparent pane rippled outward, expanding until it seemed to stretch into the void itself. At its center, light gathered, coalescing into a single, focus point that burned brighter than any reactor flare he had ever seen. The girl's glow intensified alongside it, her small frame trembling under the effort, but her eyes stayed open, fixed on the enemy, Elias realized. Standing there in the soft alien light, that he was watching a weapon far older than humanity, and it wasn't pointed at him. The living machine fired. The light tore through the void in a beam, so pure that for a heartbeat Elias thought it wasn't light at all, but something denser, heavier, an arrow loosed from the heart of a star. It crossed the distance to the Predator ship almost instantly, slamming into its hull with a flare of silver-blue brilliance. The impact didn't explode outward. Instead, it sank in, as though the beam were unraveling the ship from the inside. For a moment, the Predator vessel's red glare flickered, dimmed. Elias thought the fight was over. Then the ship screamed. It wasn't a sound in the air, but a vibration in the bones, an ugly, grating resonance that made the chambers light shiver and Elias's teeth ache. The Predator ship's spines unfolded, splitting apart into jagged petals that revealed a pulsating core. From that core, a wave of darkness burst outward, not the absence of light, but something heavier, like ink poured into space. It struck the living machine's veil with a shudder that made the floor lurch under Elias's feet. The transparent pane rippled violently. The strands in the basin writhed around the girl, their glow faltering. She staggered, one knee bending under the force, and Elias moved before thinking, stepping into the basin to catch her. The moment his boots touched the strands, a shock raced up his legs, not pain, but a jolt of raw awareness, as if the machine were suddenly aware of him. Flashes rushed into his mind, stars bending under impossible weight, fleets burning in the dark, and the girl's face, older and younger all at once, framed in alien light. The vibration intensified. Cracks of blackness spread along the veil, not tearing but infecting it. The Predator's attack wasn't just brute force, was a corruption, a way of making the light itself turn against them. Elias felt the machine pulling at him now, not with hands but with intent, as though testing if he could bear part of the load. The girl's weight leaned into him, her breath shallow, her constellations dimming under her skin. Outside, the Predator ship drew closer again, its spines folding inward as it prepared for a second strike. Elias gritted his teeth, one arm wrapped around the girl. And for the first time, he answered the pull from the living machine. The moment Elias stopped resisting, the living machine surged into him. Not physically, no tendrils or mechanical limbs, but with a flood of sensation so intense it nearly drove him to his knees. Lungs burned with air that wasn't air. His vision split between the chamber and a vast, impossible map of stars. Each glowing point pulsed in rhythm with his own heartbeat, and somewhere far away, the Predator ship was a knot of darkness, threading its way toward them. He could feel its hunger now, metaphorical, but real, a biological need to consume light, to strip energy from anything it touched until nothing remained but husk and silence. The girl stirred in his arms, her head tilted toward him, and her gaze was no longer clouded with exhaustion. Instead, he saw something fierce, their trust, but also expectation. Her hand, small and cold, pressed against his chest, and the strands in the basin wrapped higher around both of them, linking their bodies to the chamber. A heat spread through him, not burning, but sharpening every nerve. His own memories flashed true in cities, the smell of scorched metal, the faces of those he hadn't saved. The machine caught these memories, held them, and wove them into its light. Suddenly the veil outside didn't just shimmer, it sang. A resonance thrummed through the walls, through the basin, through Elias himself, till he realized he was not just seeing the defense, he was part of it. The Predator ship fired again, spears of void racing toward them. But now Elias could feel the trajectories, sense the angles, predict their impacts before they struck. The machine responded faster, bending the veil with pinpoint precision, so each spear missed, curving harmlessly into space. The Predator adapted quickly, shifting tactics, launching a storm of smaller, jagged projectiles designed to scatter and overwhelm. Elias inhaled deeply, and without thinking, he pushed mentally, instinctively channeling his will into the machine. The strands flared white, the veil expanded outward in a dome, and the projectiles dissolved before they could even reach. Through the star map in his mind, Elias sensed the Predator's hesitation. It hadn't expected a wounded relic to fight back, and it certainly hadn't expected a human to be inside, guiding its light. But hesitation was not retreat. The Predator's spines opened again, revealing a deep, spiraling vortex at its Centera weapon that wasn't meant to pierce, but to consume whole. The girl's grip on him tightened, and Elias realized that whatever came next would either bind them forever or tear them apart. The vortex bloomed like a wound in space, its edges writhing, its pull immediate. Elias felt it in his bones before. He saw its effect. The chamber's air seemed too thin, the very light bending toward the Predator's core. The star map in his mind flickered, as if entire constellations were being plucked from existence. The machine strained against it, the veil trembling, threads shuddering under the pull. The girl's constellations flared one last time, bright and fragile. Her forehead pressed to his chest, and he understood without words that she was giving him everything. Energy surged into him, his muscles locking under the strain, his vision narrowing to a single point, the Predator's heart. His pulse merged with the machine's rhythm until they were one. Elias didn't try to shield anymore. He aimed. The strands in the basin rose like a tide, wrapping both him and the girl until they were cocooned in living light. The machine channeled through them, gathering every fragment of stored energy, every flicker of memory, every echo of the stars it had once carried. The chamber around them grew blinding, the light no longer soft but fierce, focused, weaponized. He, saw the predator's hunger reaching, stretching, ready to strip them down to nothing, and then he released. The beam that erupted was not just light but history, fury, grief, and hope woven into a single, unstoppable spear. It crossed the void faster than thought, piercing the vortex's heart. The predator's scream tore through his mind, a black shape unraveling under the impossible weight of everything it had tried to consume. Its spines collapsed inward, its core imploded, and then silence. When the star map cleared, the darkness was gone. Only drifting fragments remained, already cooling in the void. Leia swayed, the machine's grip loosening, the strands slowly retracting. The girl's glow dimmed, but her breathing steadied against him. He realized she had survived because he had chosen her over the fight, over escape, over himself. Outside, the stars looked different closer, somehow warmer. The machine's presence faded from his mind, leaving only a quiet sense of gratitude. They were still alive together, and somewhere out there, light still answered light.